Thank you to Bandai Namco for providing us with early access to Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. I've been playing Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree for about 2 weeks now. I've explored every cave, conquered every dungeon, and for the most part have cracked every secret, and I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that FromSoft has done it once again. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today I'm sharing my thoughts on Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree after beating the DLC and exploring everything the Shadow Realm has to offer. To level set, I'll be doing my utmost to keep this video spoiler-free. We won't showcase any story details or bosses beyond what you've already seen from the preview footage, but I do want to show you some of the different zones within the Shadow Realm. Personally, I had not gone hands-on with the game during any of the previous preview opportunities, so when I loaded up my Steam key, it was the first time I was experiencing the Shadow Realm for the first time. And oh man, what an experience it was. I do want to start with the world itself. The Shadow Realm sounds like a dead and dreary place, and as you might expect with any FromSoft game, there are plenty of places like that to be found, but shockingly, I found the Shadow Realm to be quite beautiful at the same time. Places like the Cerulean Coast honestly took my breath away with its unexpected color palette and design. Other places like the Rao Ruins, I just couldn't believe were in a place called the Shadow Realm, because they were so lush and full of life. Throughout all of my exploration, one thing continued to stand out to me: the scale. This is by far the biggest FromSoft DLC with more things to see and do than any of its previous expansions to base games. That sense of scale and grandeur that was established in Elden Ring just continues with Shadow of the Erdtree. You'll rely on Torrent to transport you around the world, and as you look off in the distance, you'll see a castle or a tower and ask yourself, just how big is this world? When I first started exploring, I looked at the map and actually thought, okay, this is what I'd expect from a normal game's DLC. You can intentionally only see one panel of the full map, but as you find map fragments, you realize it's about 6 times the size of what you can initially see. It's impressive, honestly, and that carries through the various crypts, castles, dungeons, and more. There's a lot of familiarity with what you're seeing and experiencing, but within that are some new moments of discovery, and sometimes even fear. I think about my first time exploring Bellerat Jail. The team leaned into the backstory and creation of the Pot People, and it's disturbing to say the least. It's a new idea layered on top of a familiar experience, and that works time and time again throughout the entirety of the DLC. One of the things that stood out to me the most during my playthrough were the new weapon types that were introduced to the game. I've always been someone that struggles to find the right build. It just doesn't come naturally to me, and with the introduction of weapons like the Light Greatsword, Beast Claw, and Great Katana, I felt like the team, somehow, managed to find even more nuance within their already wide array of weapon types available to players. The new weapons feel different by design, and that's something I always look for when I'm playing an expansion or DLC. The team could have gone the easy route and just added new reskinned variants of gear that already existed, but FromSoft went the opposite direction. Not only are the new weapons interesting, but the new weapon types provide entirely new options for players within their build, and that disruption in and of itself is worth talking about. You might be locked into playing one particular way, but unlock Milady, one of the new Light Greatswords, and your whole world could be turned upside down. While I wouldn't call anything here innovative, some of the new weapon types feel that way in the construct of a FromSoft game because they're so unique. Something like hand-to-hand arts, which is unlocked a bit later in the game, is such a drastic shift from the norm of swinging swords and axes that it feels entirely unique, and I believe players are going to respond to that in a major way. Of course, new weapons are only great if they're matched up against new enemies to fight, and oh boy, let me tell you, there is certainly some interesting encounters in this DLC. My overall impression during my first 10 or so hours was that again, things felt familiar and yet entirely new at the same time. For example, the Mesmer soldiers are just a different take on the soldiers from the base game. What that means is there's a familiarity immediately established as a player, but because they have different movesets and mannerisms, it's like learning an enemy all over again. That experience happens over and over as you explore the Shadow Realm, run into new enemies, and learn to counter their moveset. And while yes, there are some enemies from the base game that are reused in the DLC, those instances are few and far between, and I never really found it disrupted the fun that I was having. Old enemies mixed with new works in this case because of the scale of the world. and when I was exploring a new area, the team always introduced something new to the fight, which immediately helped establish that area as different within the Shadow Realm. Then of course there are the bosses, and like I said in the intro, I am not about to spoil anything you haven't seen in the previews or experienced yourself, but I will give you my overall impressions of the bosses across the entire DLC. Overall, Shadow of the Erdtree is not the most difficult FromSoft game ever created. I think we'll all look back on the experience well after release and see that we all agree on that point. But what I will say is that there are a select few bosses within the DLC that will become some players' hardest boss they've ever fought. Again, we're not showing those on the screen now, but when you run headfirst at a boss for 100+ attempts, those moments stand out. I am by no means a Souls expert, far from it, but I have been fighting bosses for over 20 years and love the theory behind boss design, so when I truly face a formidable foe, I can recognize that. I'll be really curious to see the community's overall feedback to the bosses after a few weeks, because while I think it'll be in line with my thoughts here, one person's opinions just aren't enough. If we had to boil down my entire experience with Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, I'd say it's simply more Elden Ring, and I mean that in the best possible way. Few people denied that the base game was a masterpiece. It was a game of the year, won countless awards, and at its lowest never dropped below 30,000 concurrent players on Steam. There's a reason for that. FromSoft has mastered what many feel is truly missing from open world games nowadays: true exploration. There's something about stepping into a new part of the world, not knowing where to go or what to do, and in those moments of uncertainty, you feel empowered. Empowered to make your own choice, not dictated to you by the game or its systems. Add on to that the incredible visuals, the dark fantasy story, the combat mechanics, the build potential, all of the things that make an RPG what it is, and at almost every turn, Elden Ring hits a home run. The only thing in my entire DLC experience that I really found to be a bit lackluster was the new Erdtree fragment progression system and the revered Spirit Ash system. Throughout exploration, you'll find those two items at almost every major point of interest. Collect a couple, bring it back to a site of grace, and you get a permanent buff within the Shadow Realm. It's a fine enough system from a power progression standpoint, but it certainly lacks a bit of that excitement of other systems. You'd think that getting stronger would be something really fun and memorable, but I never really felt that way with either of these two turn-ins. It was a couple clicks and boom, stronger instantly, and while that's nice, it certainly felt like it deserved a little more grandeur. That is a small thing to nitpick, especially when there is so much about Shadow of the Erdtree the team does get right, but I want to share all of my thoughts about the game, good, bad, or otherwise. I wanted to end talking about my overall immersion with the game, and while abstract, I think that's something really important to talk about here because it's something FromSoft understands so well. Realizing that I was amongst a handful of people playing this before everyone else, it wasn't lost on me how small I felt in this massive new world. Everything I was experiencing was new, and without a video or a wiki to guide me, it was up to me and my ability to navigate and perceive the world that made the entire journey special. Of course, with every new FromSoft game, you get a bit more accustomed to their way of thinking, their design principles, but that makes it even more sweet when you run across something truly different. I won't say too much, but one such moment does occur when you're doing the quest for Ymir, who you find at the Cathedral of Manus Metri. Once discovered, you'll have to blow into these massive stone fingers, and I'll be honest, it's equal parts hilarious and unsettling. It's moments like that which kept me invested in the DLC, and I don't want to undercut how important that really is. I will also say the team really pushes the spectrum with the gameplay experience. Locations like the Abyssal Woods are downright horror-like, while other places, such as the Hinterlands, are gorgeous and picturesque. It's clear that FromSoft has pulled all of their knowledge together and incorporated elements of their previous Souls games into Elden Ring and this DLC. So much of the experience is memorable, and for Souls veterans, there's a good chance that's because it's a fully realized version of something they loved about a previous game. Whether it's a specific zone on a map, a new enemy with a familiar moveset, or even a weapon or piece of armor that reminds you of something from a previous game, Elden Ring is the through line. The game the team has been aspiring to create, and Shadow of the Erdtree continues that legacy. That leaves us with one quick question. Is Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree worth the $40 price tag? Well, if you like Elden Ring, then yes, because it's essentially a new, smaller Elden Ring. This is one of the first DLCs I've played where I almost feel like I'm playing a new game entirely, not just some additional content the developers thought of to sell more copies. Yes, the experience is familiar, but it's also completely new. By my standards, and I'm guessing by many others, this game and the DLC will be ones we talk about for a very, very long time. So there you have it, my thoughts on Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree after beating the game and exploring everything the Shadow Realm has to offer. We have so many great videos planned for you, so if you like guides, tutorials, and gameplay walkthroughs, be sure to hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.